You know, for those of us who call San Francisco home, June really is the best of all possible months. Not only is it Gay Pride, it is the time for Frameline, the oldest and largest LGBT arts organization in the world. And tonight, we're going to learn all about this year's festival from Francis Wallace. How are you?
Good, thank you, David. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So this is 37 years for Frameline.
Yep, 37 years. Oldest LGBT film event in the world.
And,
yes.
and I am correct, it's still the largest LGBT cultural organization in the world, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yes?
And you've been working for it for 10 years.
10 years, yeah. Wouldn't work for anyone else. Love it.
Yeah, and even though I botched at the beginning before the interview, I said, what part of England are you from? And you said Australia. It's like, watch David, take foot out of mouth. So how did you get from Australia to New York to here? What was your path to get to Frameline?
I used to work actually for the Melbourne International Film Festival in Australia, and then when I moved to America, I just wanted to do similar work, actually.
Yeah.
So,
it's interesting, so Melbourne to San Francisco, the first time I was in Melbourne was 15 years ago.
Oh.
And I remember one of my Aussie friends had said, it's going to remind you of San Francisco. And it did. I mean, more than Sydney. It just had that kind of San Francisco feel to it. Have you found that? Yeah,
absolutely. Actually, we always say like San Francisco is like Melbourne and LA is like Sydney. That type of feel. Yeah, definitely.
So, in your 10 years, what has changed for Frameline?
I just think that as the LGBT community has grown and kind of grown up too in the last decade, especially in this country and a lot of other countries throughout the world, that the films and the scripts and what we're seeing has changed as well, and is usually ahead of the curve, actually.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember when I moved to San Francisco in the mid-1980s, a lot of the films in the film festival were about AIDS, HIV. We watched our films reflect the reality.
Yeah.
And over the last few years, there's been a lot of stuff about same-sex marriage, more films about transgender issues.
Yes.
I mean, Frameline, in a way, shows us our reality where we are.
Exactly.
So, what is it looking at this year?
This year, I mean, I think especially the narrative features, like the opening night Concussion is a very evolved lesbian narrative midlife crisis film.
Sounds like a riot.
It is,
no,
actually.
I'm teasing.
It is. It was one of the favourites from Sundance, and some midlife crises, they might evolve into becoming, some type of sex worker or something. So it does. It has like an exciting edge to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what are some of the other highlights coming out of this year's festival? Without giving away the plots, of course, but just enough.
Just enough. I'm a big fan of Divine. So there's a documentary, I Am Divine, by Jeffrey Swartz, which is going to be just huge, through the roof.
Yeah, and will this be using just archival footage of Divine, or is there someone who's actually portraying Divine in the film?
No, it's mostly archival footage. I'm not sure if anyone could.
I was going to say those would be big shoes to fill.
Yeah,
I mean,
really.
Big dresses too.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. And it really shows him too, like the kind of kid from Baltimore. Like it goes through all of his background and history, and you really, I mean, what you didn't know about Divine, is something.
Are we going to see John Waters in this film?
Of course.
And now that he's at least quasi-San Franciscan, are we going to have John there?
I'm not sure if he's available, actually, unfortunately.
Well, if you see him, and and maybe he's watching, because I've been saying, John, I want you on the show. Yeah, well, because I've teased him. I mean, we've worked with John on numerous projects, and I once said to him, I said, so are you a San Franciscan now? He said, well, I spend a good deal of time here, but he said, my brand is Baltimore. So he's, John is always connected with Baltimore like Divine was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and what a place too. You realize, kind of the smell of it. You see what grows out of there. What an amazing place.
I've always felt kind of bad for Baltimore. I mean, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and Richmond and Baltimore were similar cities, and but Baltimore always had kind of a bad rep. But then John Waters kind of turned that into its own kind of interesting, weird celebrity.
Yeah, I kind of love those cities. I think the roughness of Australia too, like we tend to like the rougher edge than the shiny cities. So those places, really have a special place for me anyway. Yeah.
And so we've got the Divine documentary, we have Concussion, and what else do we have to look forward to?
There's a wonderful showcase documentary too, Big Joy, The Adventures of James Broughton, who was like a filmmaker, poet.
Word.
Yeah.
Wow, that I really want to see, because there's a whole generation of people now, probably two, that don't know who James Broughton was. And I had the privilege of meeting him. Actually, In My Home is an original poem he wrote that's framed.
No.
It was actually given to our housemate, Anthony, and then he's given it to my husband, Alfredo. And I guess it was like 15 years ago or something. I met James, and at that time he was in his late 80s.
Yeah.
And he had this twinkle in his eye, and I remember I was tending to him as if, he were a respectable elderly gentleman.
Yes.
And, he pinched my bum and was flirting with me. I was like, I can't believe it. He was such a character.
Yeah, it just seems like larger than life.
Yeah.
Actually, in the film, just does such credit to him and his lifestyle and his joyous sexual liberation theories. He
met his last husband in class. He was teaching, as I recall, and his husband was, I think, 30 or 40 years younger.
Yeah.
I mean, well done.
Yes.
Yeah, the gay cougar.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that too, like you speak to a lot of the history too, David. It's just so important at Frameline to show a lot of that history, understand where we came from.
So 10 years for you. What's been the best part and the worst part? I mean, there were some lean years there. I mean, the recession was rough on all nonprofits, certainly Frameline.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think now I'm part of the programming team. That's just so exciting. It's just honour to serve the artists and the filmmakers. And there were some lean years too, but we have very strong leadership and strong financial management, so we've always been able to kind of guide the ship through.
Right. Do you think that Frameline now is a solidly respected part of the film community? I don't mean the gay film community. I mean the film community. I mean, we know Sundance, and there's all these other festivals around the world. But, there was a time when everyone said, well, there's this, and then there's those gay festivals. Do you think that time has passed? Now we're fully a part of the overall cultural framework of the film industry?
That's a really good question. I think actually we're getting there still, because I think it's like Frameline itself is so much about community and San Francisco, but I think as the films gradually evolve too, as I've seen over the last decade, then the festival itself has gradually done that too. It's got a huge name in New York. Whenever I say I'm with Frameline, everyone goes, film industry, gay, straight, whatever. They know it, and it's so respected.
When did that start? Has that always been the case during your 10 years there, or have you just noticed it?
Yeah, I think because we're a well-resourced non-profit and we run year-round programs too, people know us for those programs too. So
is Frameline mainly a LGBT organization or mainly a film organization now?
That's also a good question. I would say LGBT first. Yeah.
But quality is of utmost importance. I mean, you wouldn't run a film just because, it has an interesting story to tell. It has to be of a certain caliber.
Oh, absolutely. We had 800 submissions, the largest ever for the film festival this year.
And does every year it grow? I mean, were there some years where you had less, or does every year you get more?
Yeah, this is the highest number we've ever received. Last year, I think we got just over 600, so it's 200 more submissions this year.
And how do you decide? I mean, you say you're part of a programming, is it committee? I mean, how do you select out of 800? I mean, how many are going to be in the festival?
There's over 300 films. Yeah.
So how do you get those 800 to a list of 300?
Yeah. So for the feature narratives and docs, the three key programmers, we decide on those mostly. But then for the shorts, we do have committees because there's over 400 shorts as well, 500 shorts.
Yeah. So you're sitting at home a lot at evening with your pajamas and a DVD player or something.
It's very glamorous. It's such a glamorous job. Mostly in your soft pants.
Yeah.
Watching screens. Yeah. Exactly.
And then the winners are announced. When are they announced? It's in May or?
No, June. So the festival's from June 20th to June 30th.
Right.
So we announce the winners June 30th at closing night.
I got it.
Yeah,
I got it.
Yeah.
So right now you're preparing for 2014.
Oh, not yet, no, because we'll get through this year first, and then we'll start preparing for 2014.
Then we'll start preparing. Okay, so you can't give me any hints of what we're going to see next year.
Next year, no, not as yet, no.
Now, I mean, Frameline's also had its share of controversies over the years. Some films that some people said, why'd you do that? How does that feel? And of course, every organization that's LGBT has controversy, whether it's Pride or whatnot. I think it's part of who we are to kind of wrestle with these issues. What does Frameline do when someone says, I don't like that movie? How does that impact the process around Frameline?
I just think, I mean, we get that a lot, and then the next person says to you, that's the best film I've ever seen. So you've just got to take the individual perspective, and I think as you're serving a community, you just listen, we're all doing the best we can, and there's a lot, as we know, very opinionated, and it's great that people take so much notice of us and the work that we do.
Now, besides obviously, same-sex marriage, transgender issues, what are some things, issues-wise, that we're going to see dealt with in this year's festival we haven't seen before? I mean, I know, in the last few years we've actually had films that explored being a member of the Muslim community and gay. Films about being gay and Palestinian. What are some new voices that we're going to hear this year that we haven't heard before?
I think some of the documentaries coming out of the Asian continent, actually. There's a few, Mama Rainbow, which is out of China, actually, and tells the story from the mother's perspective of like gay, lesbian, sons and daughters. And this is a new voice from China.
And this is a documentary?
Actually. Yes.
And is it a Chinese filmmaker?
Yes,
So it was actually made in China?
It was, yes, Wow. So, I mean, I hadn't seen this before. And it seems like it might have been kind of overly produced in a positive light. So we're kind of curious, but there is a lot of stuff now coming out of China.
That's interesting because, I mean, I travel to China probably once or twice a year for business. And I remember the first time there, I met a friend in Shanghai, and I said, oh, well, it just had to be during June. And I said, so, what's gay pride like in China? He says, I said, no, what's a gay pride parade like in China? He kind of laughed. And he said, oh, we don't have gay pride parades in China. And I said, oh, it's because it's communist. He said, no, it's not because it's anti-gay. It's just Chinese don't like big groups of people.
Right.
It wasn't the anti. And I said, well, is there an anti-gay element in China? And he says, literally, China is a godless society. It's not pro or anti. It's just we don't talk about it. It's this very interesting sort of Chinese closet. It makes me curious to see this film because I wonder how these censors felt about it. Who saw it in China before it got here?
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of interviews just on the street, and that's exactly what happens. People just are hesitant to have an opinion.
Yeah. Anything else that you think is going to make people say, wow, that's something that I wouldn't have seen if I didn't go to the Frameline Festival?
We have the first David Sedaris adapted short story, which is COG, and that's one of our showcase narratives too. And I'm a huge Sedaris fan, and this was at Sundance as well. So, and he was at Sundance, and we're trying to get him too. So
David Sedaris, come to Frameline.
So that's a really interesting to see his work adapted, like a short story, into a full narrative film.
So is there more cross-pollination now between things like a Sundance Festival and Frameline than there was before? I mean, there was a time when you only saw these films at Frameline. You wouldn't see them anywhere else before or after. No,
I think because of the nature and the quality of the films is increasing, we've become a part of the bigger marketplace too, both in the United States but globally.
Do you have any people that complain and now say Frameline's become too commercial?
Yes, some people do that, I think. Yeah, they feel like, we're just showing the glossy, good-looking lads from LA type of film. But we show that because there's a marketplace for it. But we also show... Exactly, people love it. So, but we also will show, the first Nepalese lesbian narrative feature as well. So it services everyone.
A Nepalese
lesbian narrative feature called Sungava, Dance of the Orchids, like the first lesbian narrative film ever made out of Nepal.
I've had people tell me that seeing films at Frameline sometimes help them come out to family, change their lives. I mean, film, having your life represented on the big screen can be an emotional experience. In our last few moments, share with me any stories or memories you have of the last few years of someone who said to you, Frameline really had an impact on my life.
I think last year's opening night, actually, with Vito, also by director Jeffrey Schwartz.
About the life of Vito Russo.
And he's doing I Am Divine this year. After the screening, a young lad got up, he was 17 years old, and he said watching that documentary, he realised he needed to come out to his family, the extended community, and that he was going to walk in the shoes of Vito Russo.
Wow.
And you're just like, oh, it is changing people's lives.
It gives me goosebumps. I remember meeting Vito Russo when this is now 27 years ago, speaking about his book, The Celluloid Closet. So one of our greats.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Frances, thank you for being with us.
Thank you
And of course,
so
if
much.
anyone wants to learn more, they can go online too.
Frameline.org.
Thanks so much.
Lovely. Thank
We've
you.
been speaking with Frances Wallace about Frameline. Next up, we're going to speak with noted Bay Area actor Rudy Guerrero and his part in the play Drunk Enough to Say I Love You. We'll be right back.